Welcome to the Daily Report on Friday, April 18th. I'm Lindsey Reiser. No Margaritaville, a Democratic senator who visited a man wrongly deported to El Salvador, counters the narrative from that country's president on their visit. Plus, new details about the horrific shooting on the campus of Florida State University. What we're learning about the victims and the alleged gunman.
Maryland Senator Chris Van Hollen says he has met with Kilmar Abrego Garcia in El Salvador.
As the federal courts have said, we need to bring Mr. Abrego Garcia home to protect his constitutional rights to due process.
You have this broader issue, what becomes of Mr. Abrego Garcia independent of this meeting. The president of El Salvador says he will remain in Salvadoran custody in that prison, and the lawsuits, the legal challenges about getting him back continue to mushroom.
Law enforcement identified the suspected shooter as 20-year-old FSU student Phoenix Eichner, the stepson of a Leon County Sheriff's deputy.
He has been steeped in the Leon County Sheriff's Office family, engaged in a number of training programs that we have.
I think we have a really good chance of getting it done, and it's coming to a head right now.
His comments came hours after Secretary of State Marco Rubio warned that the U.S. could move on from negotiations.
We are now reaching a point where we need to decide and determine whether this is even possible or not.
Hello, and thank you for joining us. The Trump administration says the clock is ticking to reach a ceasefire in Ukraine. Since taking office 3 months ago, President Trump and U.S. officials have engaged directly with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and Russian President Vladimir Putin in hopes of ending the deadly conflict. During the campaign, Trump repeatedly claimed he could end the war in 24 hours. But Secretary of State Marco Rubio now says the president's patience is wearing thin. Here's what he told reporters after a meeting with European leaders in Paris.
The Ukraine war is a terrible thing, but it's not our war. We didn't start it. The United States has been helping Ukraine over the last 3 years, and we want it to end. If it's not possible, if we're so far apart that this is not going to happen, then I think the president's probably at a point where he's going to say, well, we're done. So we need to determine very quickly now, and I'm talking about in a matter of days, whether or not this is doable.
We'll have more on that in a moment. Judge James Boasberg ordered an emergency hearing Friday night to hear arguments from the ACLU about a temporary restraining order that could potentially slow the Trump administration's use of the Alien Enemies Act. Let's bring in Justice Department reporter Jake Rosen. Jake, what did we learn?
Well, that's right. These proceedings are ongoing, but the ACLU is asking Boasberg to mandate that across potentially nationwide and specifically in Texas, reminder that this is a D.C. federal judge, to mandate at least 30 days written notice in English and Spanish for anyone who the Trump administration would deem potentially a member of Tren de Aragua. So that's a Venezuelan man in the United States, older than 14 years old. They see this as a big, important step going into the weekend because they say that they have evidence from local attorneys across the country saying that their clients have been moved from detention centers all around the country to somewhere in northern Texas where the Trump administration is allegedly planning to deport people and do another set of these Alien Enemies Act flights, potentially to El Salvador. The Department of Justice says that no deportations are scheduled for tonight or tomorrow, but Boasberg has asked the Department of Justice to reconfirm that. There's a hearing Monday, and it seems like Boasberg is planning to rule something as to stay this case over the weekend and at least buy the ACLU potentially more time to kind of make sure that everybody here is getting due process before they're deported.
We have a lot of different stories to hear with you, Jake. So there was a ruling about the Turkish student arrested by ICE last month. What happened?
Well, that's right. Rumeysa Ozturk, who's that Tufts University student who was detained by the Trump administration and moved to Louisiana. Her attorneys argued in court in Vermont, where she was detained briefly and where her attorneys filed the suit. They asked for her full release from this detention center. The judge did not grant that, but he ordered that ICE move her from Louisiana, where she is currently being held, to Vermont so she can be in person for the future legal proceedings that are in her case. She's trying to block her deportation and also free herself from detention. That has not yet happened, and earlier this week, an immigration judge refused to release her back out into the public.
The DOJ keeps releasing information related to Kilmar Abrego Garcia. He is the man who was mistakenly deported to El Salvador. What did we hear today? And there's a discrepancy about where he's being held.
Well, that's right. The Department of Homeland Security put out some information on social media today citing Mr. Abrego Garcia getting pulled over in 2022 in Tennessee, where he was allegedly driving multiple men who were not from America in a car. They had no luggage with them, which led a state trooper to write in his police report that he thought potentially Mr. Abrego Garcia was involved in potentially human trafficking or moving illegal migrants around the country. There were no criminal charges ever filed for this. He was just given a citation for an expired license, but it certainly comes as the Trump administration has been pointing to not just that, but Mr. Abrego Garcia's past behavior and relationship with his wife. CBS News reviewed some court documents yesterday showing that he did have at least a couple alleged physical altercations with her. This comes as the Trump administration is trying to change the tide of how the public perceives him. You saw the president say in the Oval Office today that he is violent, and they're trying to harp on this message as Senator Chris Van Hollen came back today from Maryland after meeting with him, saying how much he supports Mr. Abrego Garcia and wants him back in the United States for due process proceedings to play out.
What else did the senator say, and is there any indication that his efforts to get Abrego Garcia back to the States are working?
Well, Chris Van Hollen said as soon as he got back to the United States at Dulles Airport in Virginia, he said that this case is bigger than just Mr. Abrego Garcia and it threatens potentially all Americans. Take a listen to what he had to say.
This case is not just about one man. It's about protecting the constitutional rights of everybody who resides in the United States of America. If you deny the constitutional rights of one man, you threaten the constitutional rights and due process for everyone else in America.
Well, you saw just there that Senator Van Hollen was really making this about not just Mr. Abrego Garcia or alleged gang members who have been deported, but also about college students who have been here studying and have been detained without their due process rights. And as we know, as there have been some reporting out there that President Trump is considering sending Americans to the Supermax prison in El Salvador, there's certainly a belief to be had, at least among Democrats, that once Americans would be down there, they would not have due process rights either and would not be able to get in touch with attorneys for future proceedings, potentially leaving them locked up there for a long time. Lindsay?
All right, Jake Rosen, thank you. CBS News White House reporter Olivia Rinaldi joins us now. Olivia, we sort of laid out where the administration stands when it comes to Ukraine. We have Secretary of State Rubio saying, look, we're going to find out in the coming days if this is worth our time. We have the vice president saying he's optimistic that they can strike a deal. Where do we go from here?
Yeah, Lindsay, you're right in saying that the White House is losing their patience when it comes to negotiating the end to the war in Ukraine, that nearly 3-year-long war between Ukraine and Russia. It was a bit of a surprise this morning when we heard from Secretary Rubio, fresh off of a meeting with French counterparts, where he talked with reporters and said, look, there's a real question here about whether or not we can even get to a result here. And at a certain point, the U.S. is going to walk away from these negotiations. That came as a shock, of course, to the Europeans and to the Ukrainians, who are eager to get to perhaps some type of ceasefire that is beneficial to them. Secretary Rubio went on to say if it's not possible to end the war, we need to move on, and said that they would decide this in a matter of days, or whether or not this is doable in the next few weeks. So quite notable there. But we also heard from Vice President Vance in Italy with Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, where he said they're optimistic that they can get to an end to the war in Ukraine. Also said that there have been some interesting news in the last 24 hours about this specific end to this war. We also heard from President Trump today in the Oval Office about this as well, where he said there's no specific number of days that he's looking at to see if they can make a deal, but he said they do want to get it done. It's a signal overall, though, that their patience is really wearing thin, specifically on this. And of course, this doesn't happen in a vacuum. Let's think back to a few weeks ago, a couple months ago, when President Zelensky of Ukraine was here at the White House and had that blow up in the Oval Office between President Trump and Vice President Vance. Since then, they have restarted negotiations and trying to find an end to that war. But this White House, the Oval Office, says they're not quite sure if they can get there anymore. Lindsay?
We're also learning Gary Shapley has been replaced as the acting IRS commissioner just 2 days after he took the post. Remind us who he is and what's happening here.
Well, to set the scene a little bit, this is the fourth acting commissioner of the IRS in the last year, or since the start of this year, rather. So just think about that. There's been a lot of turnover in this role specifically, but Gary Shapley was someone who was the whistleblower during the Hunter Biden IRS tax case. He spoke with CBS News about that at the time. We had done extensive reporting on that, and as a result, Trump essentially picked him to lead the IRS. Now, 2 days later, he is out of that role, and we're told reportedly that some of this is because of issues between Elon Musk, senior advisor to the president and leader of Doge, and Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary. That Secretary Bessent was not aware that Gary Shapley was the one that they were pushing to be in this role, and he was being pushed there at the behest of Elon Musk. So a lot of backbiting and conversation specifically about this role, but 2 days later he is out of that role. Again, the fourth person to hold that role in this year alone. Trump's pick to lead the IRS, Billy Long, his nomination and his proceedings are stuck in Congress. So still really a question of who exactly is going to fill this critical role leading the nation's tax revenue service.
Finally, what do we know about the Trump administration moving to classify career civil servants as at-will employees?
Yeah, we found out about this earlier today. This is what's colloquially known as Schedule F, which essentially means that career civil servants who serve in government are really protected from the turnover from administration to administration. Of course, there's political appointees, but those people who have been in that role for 20 years, serving as political experts or experts rather in subject matter, can remain in that role. We now know that the White House is looking to overturn that, and they're going to look specifically at that. The Office of Personnel Administration Management estimates that about 50,000 people will be impacted by that if the White House chooses to get rid of Schedule F. So quite notable there. And what this essentially does would allow the White House greater flexibility in firing those employees, because it would change them from career civil servants to at-will employees. So would be part of their efforts to reshape the federal government, something Trump has set his eyes on for quite a while, Lindsay. So it is notable that they are pushing forward with this so that they can fire more of those career civil servants.
Okay, Olivia Rinaldi, thank you. Later this hour, I'll speak with a former U.S. ambassador to Ukraine about what the path forward looks like for Russia's invasion in that country. We're learning new details about the suspect accused of carrying out a deadly mass shooting at Florida State University Thursday. Tallahassee police say there was no connection between 20-year-old Phoenix Eichner and the victims. He was shot by police and injured in the shooting and will have to spend a significant amount of time in the hospital. Officials say he will then be transferred to a detention center and face charges up to and including first-degree murder. 2 people were killed in Thursday's shooting on campus, which remained closed Friday. 5 were also injured and being treated at a local hospital. Earlier, officials there gave an update on their conditions.
We do feel that all will make a full recovery. 2 of them are possibly going home today, which we're extremely proud of.
CBS News reporter Katie Weiss is in Tallahassee with more. And Katie, I understand you just spoke with a victim in the hospital. What did they tell you?
Well, Lindsay, good evening. A glimmer of hope right now this evening after meeting with this remarkable, inspiring young woman who is in just wonderful spirits despite everything she has endured. She is an urban planning graduate student. Her name's Madison Askins. She's attended both undergrad and graduate school here at Florida State University. And she is now recovering in the hospital tonight at Tallahassee Memorial Healthcare Hospital right here in Tallahassee, just a few minutes from the university's campus. And I want to tell you, her story is just chilling. She says she was first shot in the behind, and then her mind immediately kicked into survival mode. Take a listen.
When he got next to me, he reloaded. I heard the clip being changed. I'm familiar with guns in my household. Both my parents are retired Marines, so I've been on a shooting range before. So I believe I heard it. I believe I heard that clip being changed there, followed by him saying, "Keep running." Yeah, keep running. So I know he was hitting people who were moving. I know that if I had gotten up, he would have shot me again.
Now, she says that the tone in the shooter's voice when he was saying that was just more monotone, as if he wasn't shouting, he wasn't being more somber, he was just being neutral. She said that lack of empathy, that lack of emotion is what was most striking and chilling to her. She also wanted to mention, I asked her, I said, if you could speak directly to the person who did this to you, who put you in this hospital bed, what would you say? She says, I have nothing left to say to him. He's a bug to me. Those are her words. Now, she wants to thank both police, responders who came and helped out and really neutralized the shooter quickly, and also healthcare workers here at the hospital for their quick response. And we want to say she had one surgery yesterday. She needs one more before she can go home. Lindsay?
Grateful that she's okay. Katie Weiss, thank you. Anna Schechter joins us now. She's the CBS News Senior Coordinating Producer for the Crime and Public Safety Unit. Anna, we're getting a more clear picture of a timeline leading up to the events. What can you tell us?
That's right. We now know from police that the suspect arrived at around 11 a.m. and went into the parking garage of the university in his own vehicle. And he spent about an hour getting in and out of the vehicle, appearing, according to the surveillance footage that police reviewed, to be sort of preparing. Then around 11:51, he entered onto the campus. And just a few minutes later, at 11:56 or 57, he started shooting. It only took a few minutes for police to apprehend him. Right at 12 noon, he was shot by police. And police said yesterday at the press conference that they gave him directions that he did not follow, and that is why they fired and injured him.
Yesterday, they had also said there's no indication that that the suspected shooter had fired at police. Is that still the case?
That's still the case.
Okay.
Yes.
What are you learning about the victims who died?
Well, the two men that died both worked in some capacity at the university. One for a vendor that provided food services, and the other man also worked for a vendor on campus. He was 45 years old. We just learned of his identity, also a father. And then the other man, Roberto, was 57 years old, and he was a father of a daughter, a husband. His brother posted to social media. So we're getting a little bit more information about the picture. It's a range of victims. We learned from the university president that some of those injured who are in the hospital are students who have survived. Everyone in the hospital, doctors expect to make a full recovery. So that, of course, includes the suspect. You have 5 victims injured by gunshots, and then the 6th person in the hospital currently is the suspect, who is also wounded him by police gunfire.
So what more do we know about Phoenix Eichner? Any possible motive, and what happens next in the investigation?
In terms of motive, that's a challenge. Investigators are still gathering information from his digital footprint and also interviewing not just the eyewitnesses, but anyone who was in contact with him. That includes, of course, his stepmother and father, but also his birth mother. We've learned overnight that there was a contentious relationship between his birth mother and his father and stepmother. Lots of legal filings going back and forth between them over many years. They're also going to try to find anyone that he was talking to about potential plans. At this time, we have no information speaking to motive. All we have are a few statements that he made, for example, to a school newspaper in January, talking about the upcoming inauguration. But it's hard to tell. I read his quote very carefully, talking about Trump about to take office. And you couldn't really tell one way or the other. I couldn't glean exactly, if there was anything in that. And we actually reached out to multiple people who were classmates. What we've learned is he was quiet, reserved, but there are other reports that he would kind of stir things up and espouse conspiracy theories in class and upset some of his fellow students at FSU.
Anna Schechter, thank you.
Of course.
Still to come, request denied what lawyers for Sean Diddy Combs asked a judge for in court Friday ahead of the music mogul sex trafficking and racketeering trial. Plus, mortgage rates climb to their highest level in 2 months. What to know if you're in the market for a new home. You're watching the Daily Report. If you're in the market to buy a home this spring, you're going to want to pay attention. The average rate for a standard 30-year fixed mortgage climbed to 6.83% this week. So that's up about a quarter percentage point from the week before and the highest rate in 2 months. CBS News Money Watch correspondent Kelly O'Grady joins us now. Kelly, why are mortgage rates climbing like this, and at what point does this become way too cost prohibitive for prospective buyers?
Well, I think we already might be at that point. We've been at that point for a while. So the 30-year fixed mortgage rate, right, that is a long-term interest rate. And so what it does is it tracks the 10-year treasury. Now, all the time we talk about the Federal Reserve's benchmark interest rate, that's more of a short-term interest rate, and it does have some impact on mortgage rates. But the 10-year treasury is really important because on April 4th, it was at 3.99%. A week later, on April 10th, it jumped up to 4.49. That was a very rapid jump for the 10-year treasury, and that's exactly why you saw the mortgage rate spike so dramatically. Now, in terms of it being cost prohibitive, I mean, yes, mortgage rates are one thing, but it's also just the cost of housing in general.
And availability.
And you think about someone who got a 3% mortgage during COVID, they're looking at the market saying, well, I don't want to go buy something else and trade up.
Because even when people say, oh, you can refinance later, you still have to pay all the closing costs, and I mean, you still have to get everything approved. So President Trump says his administration is now negotiating directly with China on a trade deal when it comes to all these tariffs. And CBS News has also learned the administration has discussed a working group to deal with Beijing if this falls through. How big of a deal would it be for the two sides to come together on an agreement?
It would be a very big deal. And if you think back to the 2018 sort of trade war that happened between China and the U.S., there was a big deal. And China agreed to buy billions and billions of dollars of agricultural products. So there could be some very meaningful improvements for businesses here. But, you know, we've just seen this ratcheted up so much back and forth. I think this would also be a big deal for the markets. That would bring a lot of calm for businesses that rely on China, as well as investors who are looking at, like, you know, what is happening here. But, I mean, we've also just seen this go back and forth so many times. I think investors are in kind of a like fool me once kind of frame of mind.
So that's investors, but let's talk about just the average person. When you think about everything holistically in terms of steel and aluminum tariffs, and lumber could be going up, and the current housing market and the availability of supply right now and the mortgage rates, what is your advice to people who might be in the market now, might be in the market in the near future? How do you know when is the right time?
So right now, I think is a good time to pause because we just mentioned the fact that the 10-year treasury impacts mortgage rates. The 10-year treasury is impacted by where investors think inflation is going. So all of those things that you just mentioned could likely increase prices. And so where tariffs are going, there's just such a wild card and so much uncertainty around the U.S. economy and inflation. So right now, you're seeing mortgage rates tick up. We could see them go down if a deal happens, because then in theory, those prices wouldn't increase and you would see more stability. But you mentioned the refinancing thing. If you find that house that you love and is within your budget range,
all the boxes, is like the unicorn,
and it's in your budget range, or maybe it does need a little bit of work, but that's still in your budget, you can always refinance. Every housing expert that I talk to says marry the house and date the rate.
Okay, Kelly O'Grady, thank you. Hip-hop mogul Sean Diddy Combs appeared in court Friday as his legal team requested a delay to his May 5th sex trafficking and racketeering trial. CBS News legal reporter Katrina Kaufman was there.
Sean Combs was back in court this morning for his sex trafficking and racketeering case. Combs walked into court and hugged his attorneys. His mother and son were also in the courtroom. The judge quickly denied efforts by Combs to delay this trial by 2 months, as well as to have 2 of the charges against him dismissed. He further decided that victim number 1 will have to turn over drafts of her memoir to Combs' team, and that victims number 2, 3, and 4, women who will be testifying in this trial against Combs, can do so anonymously under pseudonyms. Combs's team argued that for two of the victims, 3 and 4, it will make it difficult for them to put on their case. They want to have witnesses come to the stand and be able to talk about them. But the judge ultimately said that he wants to protect their identities. The government had argued that for victim number 4, for example, they had never spoken out publicly about their story and are worried about embarrassment, difficulties forming future relationships, and difficulties obtaining employment. Next week, there will be another hearing on Friday before jury selection begins. Back to you.
Katrina Coffin, thank you. Still to come, a peace deal in Ukraine appears to be in jeopardy as the White House says it may abandon talks to end the war with Russia. You're watching the Daily Report. Welcome back to the Daily Report. I'm Lindsey Reiser. Here are some additions to our top stories. The suspect charged in the death of United Healthcare CEO will be arraigned on federal charges next week. Luigi Mangione was indicted Thursday on 4 counts, including 2 for stalking and 1 for murder through the use of a firearm. He could face the death penalty. Mangione is accused of gunning down Brian Thompson outside of a hotel in New York City. He pleaded not guilty to state charges in New York and Pennsylvania. Power has been restored in most of Puerto Rico after a blackout hit the island Wednesday. The local power company says some people may still experience temporary outages thanks to limited generation. Officials say a transmission line failed, though the official cause is being investigated. More than 400,000 people had also been left without water. Roughly 429,000 wireless portable phone chargers made by the tech accessory company Casely have been recalled. There have been at least 51 reports of the charger's lithium batteries either overheating, expanding, or catching fire. The chargers were sold between March 2022 and September 2024. People who own them should contact the company for a replacement. Classes remain canceled at Florida State University following Thursday's deadly shooting, as authorities work to figure out the events that led to the incident. Philip Allison joins us now. He is an FSU student who works at the student union where the shooting occurred, although he wasn't working at the time. Philip, my condolences to you and the entire FSU community. I'm so sorry for what you all are going through. How are you doing today?
I'm doing all right given the circumstances. There's still a level of shock about everything, but at this point, some people are trying to, I guess, get back into the swing of things because even though this tragedy just happened, we still have to go back to, a lot of the things in our lives, even though class is canceled. I know when the attack started yesterday, I was just walking back from one of the dining halls when I heard what I assumed was construction. We have construction all the time. I hear it all the time. Then, cops wound up being everywhere and had to make a very ungraceful rush back to my dorm, lock the door, and just wait it out. A very stressful moment for all of us, especially once we're closer to the actual attack. I was very lucky, all things considered. But other people who were in the union, I have friends who are in the union. I have friends who saw the actual shooting. They're having a hard time pushing through right now. And I said earlier about, trying to get back into the swing of things. For some people, it's a lot harder. I've noticed a lot of kids with suitcases, a lot of cars leaving Tallahassee. A lot of people are going back home just to be with their families. My RA from my dorm sent out a poll to see who is staying, who's going. I'd say it's about 50-50 right now. So a lot of people are leaving, a lot of people are still staying. I personally would like to stay. I'm staying right now just because, I don't want this to derail my life. I know it's very hard to get through, and I know I'm very lucky in a lot of ways because it didn't happen right in front of me. But I'm just trying to keep most everything together. And that's a sentiment that some other people at the school are also sharing. I went to the same dining hall today that I did yesterday. People were still there. The gym still is about half full. Like I said, there's a good portion of people who are heading out for the weekend to be with their families, but there's still a good number of people who are staying here. And I think that just comes down to a personal decision of whether you want to push through it here or would rather just take some time to recollect yourself in the wake of such a tragedy.
Philip, how close in proximity is the dining hall dorm route that you were on from the student union?
Well, dining hall is a bit of the way down the road from the student union. I usually just take a diagonal path back. If I had to guess, it would have been like a 5-minute walk from the union. I make that walk all the time when I go to work. When I first heard the shots, I had no idea in terms of what the proximity was to me. But luckily it was still in the union.
We're hearing that the response time by police was very fast, and the way you describe it, you heard the shots and then you saw police running. Is that your understanding as well, that the response was very quick from law enforcement?
From what I've seen, I mean, I spent most of the lockdown in my room. I didn't have like a great view of everything, but I had never seen like FSU PD moving like that before. That was when I kind of realized that something was up, that it wasn't just construction. So when you see a cop just like going across campus that quickly, it's like something's serious. I also saw a bunch of students kind of running, covering their heads. And that kind of told me what was going on.
Well, Philip, again, we are so sorry that we're talking to you under these circumstances, but we appreciate your time and we appreciate you answering these questions, and we hope that you have a good rest of your semester. Thank you.
Thank you.
Former U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine, John Herbst, joins us now. He's also the Senior Director for the Atlantic Council's Eurasia Center. What, in your view, is the biggest issue preventing a lasting ceasefire in Ukraine?
Putin doesn't want it. Putin's goal is to have political control of Ukraine. He wants the war to continue, and he wants the United States to stop sending arms to Ukraine. That's his objective.
So when you hear the president there say he thinks that he sees a desire for both sides to make a deal, you question whether it really is just one side, and that is Zelensky being the one who wants a deal made.
Zelensky said, or the Ukrainian government said at the meeting in Jeddah a month ago, they were willing to accept without change the American proposal for a general ceasefire. Moscow rejected it. Moscow broke the subsequent energy installation ceasefire within an hour and a half of it being concluded. And Moscow rejected the Black Sea ceasefire. Putin wants the war to continue. He wants America to stop arming Ukraine. He wants America to help lift sanctions. That's his objective. And the only way we get him to negotiate in a serious way is by making it painful for him to continue the war. Trump has threatened that, but he's yet to take any actions to make it more difficult for Putin to continue the war.
Given what we've heard from the administration, which is conflicting messaging, I mean, we've heard the Secretary of State say we'll know in the coming days if, the window to cut a deal is closing or not. We heard the Vice President say he's optimistic a deal can be cut. Let's say, though, that the White House, the current administration, does choose to walk away from negotiations. Is it your read of the situation that then that means the U.S. also walks away from aid, or we're not there yet?
No, we don't know. If Trump were to say, okay, I'm going to stop negotiations, but I'll continue to supply American arms, Ukraine would have to pay for it. That's where he differs from Biden, but that's manageable. Then Putin's got a problem. If Trump says, I'm walking away from not just negotiations, but from any role in the war, then Putin's got exactly what he wants. The Americans out because we are the principal arsenal for Ukraine, and he can continue his fight. So that would be a policy of Americans shirking its responsibilities. You don't create peace by coddling the aggressor. You create peace by being strong with the aggressor. Trump has promised peace through strength, the way Reagan did. If he behaves the way Reagan did, then it'll all turn out. But we have to see if that's what the administration has in mind. We don't know at this point.
If the U.S. does walk away from negotiations, is there anyone else in a position to take over a role as mediator?
The Russians don't want a mediator. They want to have decent relations with the United States because the arms we supply to Ukraine have been the principal reason Moscow has been unable to win, actually after the Ukrainian resistance. And of course, the sanctions, which were an American-led effort, have been done serious damage to the Russian economy. So if we walk away from the war entirely, that gives Putin much more favorable circumstances to complete his aggression and take political control of Ukraine. But if we walk away from negotiations and continue to arm Ukraine, Putin has a problem, and that would be very effective pressure.
You don't see anybody else in Europe who is able to take on any kind of mediator role that Putin would sit at the table with?
Oh, Putin will sit and talk to others. He sat and talked to Merkel when she was in charge of Germany. He sat and talked to Macron, but he never took a step towards peace. Because again, his aim is to have political control of Ukraine, not to have just the territory of Ukraine he's already seized. So he will talk, but he will not act on that talk unless that talk demands the surrender of Ukraine. But I don't see any European government, aside from Orban in Hungary, willing to do that. And I don't see the Trump administration willing to do that. Although it's possible Trump may walk away from this and allow Putin to take Ukraine, which would be a major defeat for American diplomacy.
Ambassador John Herbst, thank you. From socializing to selling, up next, a look at the booming growth of Facebook's online marketplace. You're watching The Daily Report. While Facebook was designed as a way to socialize and connect with friends, many users are increasingly using it to buy, sell, and give away products. Data from Capital One Shopping shows more than 1.2 billion Facebook members per month use its marketplace platform. That's up to 40% of Facebook's total monthly active users. Now, a recent article in The Atlantic directly compares Facebook to Craigslist, of course, the online classifieds platform that peaked in popularity in the early 2000s. Evan McMurray wrote the story. He's a senior editor at The Atlantic. So, Evan, tell us more about the rise of Facebook Marketplace and how it compares to other e-markets.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote this article because I kept hearing variations on something that my wife had told me, which was, I'm not on Facebook, I'm on Facebook Marketplace. And I think that really drove home how much Facebook Marketplace has become kind of an entity in and of itself. It is a destination even within the Facebook universe, and that's borne out by the numbers. You just cited the 1.2 billion with a B active buyers. That eclipses eBay. Also, 16% of people who are regularly logging onto Facebook are doing so solely to access Facebook Marketplace. And those are significant numbers, especially given the context of Facebook's kind of declining cultural cachet over the last few years.
Declining cultural cachet, interesting. So to a user who joined Facebook for its purpose of socializing, what makes Marketplace attractive? Is there evidence of users only using it, other than maybe anecdotally through your wife, only using Facebook for buying and selling?
Yeah, I mean, 16% of people who are regularly logging onto Facebook are doing so only to access that Facebook Marketplace toggle. Which I think speaks to the strength of Facebook. Facebook has lost some of its cultural centrality over the last few years with the rise of TikTok and other apps. But I think that obscures how big Facebook still is and the strength and number of connections that it built up over its kind of decade and a half of social media dominance. It can basically embed a classified section onto its platform and turn it into a destination simply because so many people are logging on to do other things and it can kind of toggle over, and it eventually becomes what they are using the app for.
Does this bode well or bode poorly for the social media app?
I mean, if you're Facebook, you're very happy with this, and they have suggested that this is helping them claw back some of the younger users who have been drifting away. They have been drifting away to apps like TikTok. It does now seem that some of them, at least, are starting to come back specifically to use the marketplace function.
This is something that I hear from a lot of people, these buy nothing groups. What can you tell us about those?
Buy nothing groups are a fascinating factor to this discussion. They're hyper-local. They embrace kind of a gift economy ethos. They embrace mutual aid, and they disdain waste. And it's common for somebody to kind of log on to the Buy Nothing group and say, before I go buy this new, does anybody have this here? At the same time, they're hosted on Facebook, which is a global transaction network, and there's an interesting tension there. My wife and I, for instance, have made multiple friends off of Buy Nothing groups. We go to pick up something off someone's porch. They happen to be outside. When we're there, we start talking, and so the kids are, our kids are going to each other's birthday parties. So Buy Nothing groups are really doing the job that Facebook says it's always wanted to do, which is connect people. What's interesting is we don't make friends off of Facebook Marketplace, which at least suggests that something of the transactional nature that so suffuses Facebook in the last few years may actually be getting in the way of those connections. So you could say that Buy Nothing groups are actually doing a better job of Facebook's purported goal, which is connecting people, than Facebook is.
Okay, we're almost out of time, but do you see other social media apps and platforms looking to this as a model?
Absolutely. I think they other social media platforms are trying to introduce consumers in all a variety of ways. I think the success of Facebook Marketplace will only encourage that to happen on more and more apps.
Evan McMurray, thank you.
Thank you so much.
The NBA playoffs are finally kicking off Saturday. Up next, we'll take a closer look at this weekend's first-round matchups and discuss which teams may end up in the finals. You're streaming the Daily Report. The battle for the Larry O'Brien Trophy begins this weekend as the NBA playoffs get underway. Saturday will see 4 first-round games take place across both conferences. The Milwaukee Bucks and Indiana Pacers will kick things off in the East. The Western Conference will see a showdown between the Denver Nuggets and Los Angeles Clippers. The late window will see the New York Knicks taking on the Detroit Pistons at Madison Square Garden, and then it'll be LeBron James and the Lakers capping off Saturday's games in a matchup against the Minnesota Timberwolves. John Gonzalez joins us now to preview all this. He's a CBS Sports HQ NBA analyst and one of the hosts of the Beyond the Arc podcast. So, John, what are some of the best first-round series we should be looking at?
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of them. In the Eastern Conference, the 3-6 matchup between the Knicks and the Pistons is a really tasty one. But for me, it's the Rockets and the Warriors. It's a 2-7 matchup. And normally you'd have the 2 seed heavily favored, but the Rockets are betting underdogs in this one despite being the higher seed and having home court advantage, and that's because they're facing the Warriors. They've got Steph Curry and Draymond Green who have multiple titles and a ton of playoff experience, and they just added in Jimmy Butler, who also has a lot of playoff experience. And outside of Fred VanVleet, who's a former NBA champion himself, the Rockets don't really have that same postseason experience. And then there's some really great individual matchups. Steph Curry, the greatest shooter of all time, versus Amin Thompson, this young, dynamic player, one of the best defenders in the league. Dylan Brooks and Jimmy Butler, 2 guys who are known to get it under each other's skin. Draymond Green, always a wild card. And then you have the 2 head coaches, Ime Udoka and Steve Kerr, who are at the top of their game. So it should be a fantastic series.
Are there any teams you think could go on a surprising run in the playoffs?
Yeah, the aforementioned Golden State Warriors, not your traditional 7 seed. They started out really hot early in the season, and they fell off. They were around 500 at the trade deadline, and they tried to reunite with Kevin Durant. That didn't work out. They landed on Jimmy Butler. That's a good place to land. Since they got Jimmy Butler, #1 defense in the NBA, they create a ton of turnovers. They score off those turnovers. And in a Western Conference that's absolutely loaded, they slipped into the play-in on the final day, but they're not your traditional 7 seed. So if they can get past the Rockets, a potential second-round matchup with the Lakers, Luka, and LeBron versus Steph and Jimmy and Draymond, that would be fantastic. And then from there, they could be a 7 seed that makes it to the conference finals, and then anything could happen.
Any early picks on who makes it to the finals and ultimately who wins the trophy?
Yeah, so in the Eastern Conference, it really comes down to the Cavaliers and the Celtics. The Cavaliers have the best record in the Eastern Conference, but the Celtics are the defending champions, so I'll take them out of the East. And then, as I just mentioned, I'm super bullish on the Warriors. I'm higher on Oklahoma City. What they've done in the West has been remarkable. Best record in the NBA, best defense in the NBA by a lot. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, the presumptive MVP. Their point differential, which is how much you beat your opponents by each night, is not just the best this season, it's the best in NBA history.
Wow.
So I'll take Oklahoma City out of the West. And then between those two, look, Boston is very good. It's really difficult to be back-to-back champions. Haven't had one since 2017, 2018 when the Warriors did it. So I'll take the Thunder to get their first championship.
All right, John Gonzalez, thanks as always. And thank you for watching. CBS Evening News Plus begins after the break. You're watching CBS News 24/7.